Thank you, FEPS, for asking us to collaborate on this excellent event. This is the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, Germany's Social Democrat Political Foundation. We are the Nordic office working here with all 5 Nordic countries. And I'm very pleased to see that you are here now to speak with us on this very important topic. Joining in on a conversation about human security in Europe at a time when war has returned to the continent and civilians in Ukraine are having unbearable suffering, but not only in Ukraine, also in our wider Mediterranean neighborhood in Gaza. And let's not forget the international realm with Sudan and crises happening that are really of immense scale. For years, and even maybe you were also a little bit surprised, human security went into the backdrop. It was kind of dismissed a little bit as a soft, a little bit old-fashioned approach. It found itself in UN reports, not in defense councils, and lately in foreign policy circles, I've heard people saying, human security is a dead concept. Ooh. But the organizers of this conference, we believe this is not the case at all. We think human security asks exactly the questions that are haunting our politics. Whose lives are protected? Whose homes, hospitals, schools are considered expendable? How do our choices on rearmament, sanctions, alliances, how do the perspectives for those living under bombardment or occupation look like? So we start this panel with a premise. Europe's security will not be credible if we only define and discuss it in terms of borders, weapons, and GDP shares. We want to put the discussion back on the table and put really the protection of civilians, social resilience, well-being, also as a core strategic interest, not as an optional add-on. And I'm very happy that we have with us Henrik Møller. I would like to invite him on the stage. Henrik is member of the Folketing for the Social Democratic Party, and he is vice chairman of the Danish delegation to the Nordic Council, but also vice chairman of European Affairs Committee and spokesman of Europe since 2022. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Paul Nyrup, not only for his work in Headspace, but also for being, I think, a role model and inspiration in the Social Democratic Party throughout the years. And I think his speech today showed why we respect him very much, not only now, but also in his period as a prime minister. A little anecdote. I was, in my younger days, when Paul was the prime minister, I was an employee in the party office, the Social Democratic Party office. And when Paul was going around the country on tour, we always had one from the office driving hair, as we called it. They were in front of the prime minister, securing that everything worked, that there was not a demonstration, that he knew what he was coming to. But one of the things that I found out was the most important was that when Paul arrived, the first thing he asked about is, where is the toilet? So that was the main task, that was to be sure where is the nearest toilet when he arrived in that time. Time has changed very much since then. I will say I spent a lot of time working with the intersection between global, regional, and national problems. And I think during the Danish presidency, the blurred line between EU affairs and the global challenge have been a constant reminder of the importance of our union. It follows that some of the challenges we have addressed during our presidency have direct influence on the human security. The world is right now undergoing major geopolitical changes. And during these changes, it is incredibly important that we as progressive voters and Europeans do not lose focus on what matters. But of course, this is easier said than done. We have our hand full these years, and we seek to handle challenges bigger than we have seen in a long time. Many of these challenges are incredibly relevant to the question of human security. Again, if I look back when I was younger, I was born and raised with a wall through Berlin with an eastern side and a western side. I was participating in Denmark, an organization called Next Stop Nevada, which was an organization who was protesting against nuclear testing. So it was, in that sense, insecure, but there was two partners in the world at that time. There were the Soviet Union, and then there was the US with the rest of us. So it was somehow easier to understand. Then we have had a very long period, you could say, of the peace dividend, where we thought now we have secured things with the Eastern Wall turning down. But today we are not the bipolar society or world as we saw it. It's a multipolar which is a part of the world today, with China, with Russia, with Europe, with US, but also with Africa now and in the future, and also South America. I think as a backdrop for this session, I want to highlight two challenges as well as Danish perspectives on the matters. Firstly, we need to address the foundation on which we stand today. War has shaken the European continent. The Russian aggression is an immense challenge for our whole continent. Secondly, we cannot forget our values, no matter the challenge we face. Drastic cuts in foreign aid impacts the most vulnerable people around the world. Declining foreign aid will have terrible consequences for the human security around the world, and I think we have to remember this. To begin with, we must talk about the war. Ukraine is under attack, and right now their future, as well as our shared geopolitical reality, is being shaped. During the Danish presidency, we have spent a lot of energy preparing Ukraine for the EU membership. This is vital to ensure a swift process once we have the necessary political moments in the EU to allow Ukraine to become a member state. At the same time, the Danish government has been heavily involved in supporting Ukraine. Their fight for freedom is righteous, but also a key element in the question of EU's wider security concerns. This war of aggression is not only a question about taking land from a smaller country violently. We, the Europeans, are challenged to protect our values of liberty and ultimately the rule-based international order. So when we talk about human security and how we advance it, we cannot ignore the fact that this school of thinking is intertwined with the rule-based international order. And the rule-based international order is a distant notion from the autocratic regime that currently fuels the war of aggression in Ukraine. Therefore, I hope that the discussion on the advancement of human security does not neglect the fact that Europe is under pressure and not coming from a position of plenty. The war in Europe is real, and we must succeed in our endeavor to protect Ukraine from the authoritarian powers. With this foundation laid out, I come to the second challenge, because it's still our duty to ensure that human security is not forgotten amidst the challenge we face. Especially, there is a global tendency to cut foreign aid, which I believe is the wrong way to go. If we want to commit the rule-based international order, we need to show it. In this regard, I want to highlight a couple of ways in which Denmark balances the need to protect our foundations as well as building on top of it with initiatives that strengthen people's rights, dignity, and well-being. One way is to adhere the UN's target of 0.7% of gross national income spent on foreign aid. Prioritizing the means and committing to the UN's guidelines show that we wholeheartedly believe in the multilateral system as well as helping people in need. Additionally, it gives democratic states the credibility we need in a geopolitical environment where autocratic forces are questioning our way of life. I'm proud to say that Denmark is one of the few countries still adhering to the target. But what matters even more is the fact that we prioritize real human security in our strategy for development cooperation. Women's, children's, and minority rights, as well as equality, are important elements highlighted because it provides stronger societies and better lives for everyone. One of my concerns right now is that big countries are undermining the United Nations, the UN, and thereby make it weaker. But I think we need a stronger UN who is crucial for the human security. Returning to Denmark's commitment to help Ukraine, I also want to highlight a different approach to aid called the Danish model. Simply explained, this model is intended to support Ukraine's military industry by placing orders in Ukraine. Denmark and other countries' donations are helping Ukraine assessing more than armaments. It is an approach that supports normal Ukrainians' everyday life, ensuring that they maintain dignity, a job, and possibilities while facing an armed conflict. To sum up, when we talk about human security, we must acknowledge the conflict Europe faces. At the same time, we cannot neglect the importance of the rule-based international order and what UN means to us. And to support these systems, we must keep advancing human security. And with this backdrop, I look forward to the discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Henrik Møller. We invite you also to sit on the panel with us. Hopefully, we will have time for a lot of questions for you as well. I would like now to invite our two further experts, commentators to the panel. I will start with Ann Linde, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden until 2022. She has served also as Minister of European Union Affairs and Trade. And she was State Secretary at the Ministry of Home Affairs and head at the International Unit for the Party of European Socialists in Brussels, International Secretary. Anna, I could go on and on and on, but I know that you're also very well known, so I would like to invite you on the stage now. Thank you. And then we have with us John Karlsruth, who is research professor in the research group on peace, conflict and development at the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs, NUPI. He also has a very impressive curriculum vitae, where he has been editing very influential international journals. He has been fellow at New York University, at the International Peace Institute. He has also served as a special assistant to the United Nations and has very impressive on-the-ground experience in Chad. He has been in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Palestine, and recently also participated in shorter missions in Haiti, Liberia, Mozambique. We really have amazing experts with us. I invite you also to the panel. Now, I will switch over here so that I can see all of you. Let's start maybe with Anne. I have said it in the introduction also that the traditional security discourse is focusing very narrowly on military threats and state sovereignty, and that we can shift our focus a bit further to safety, well-being, people's access to healthcare, economic security, environmental stability. Maybe from your recent experiences, can you give us some more concrete ideas about how this fundamentally reframes what we mean by security in today's geopolitical challenging landscape?
Well, thank you, Christina, and thank you for inviting me to take part in this panel. In 2021, I was chair of the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And I travel a lot to, or even if it was COVID, we decided I could travel. I saw with my own eyes how fragile the security becomes when it's focused only on territorial defense. And neglected the human dimension. For example, in eastern Ukraine, before the full-scale invasion, because that came February 22, local mayors and civil society and other actors, they repeatedly told me that their greatest vulnerabilities were not military. It was the lack of access to healthcare, to jobs, education, safe housing, and also protection from gender-based violence. And by the way, we know that we didn't concentrate on things around in COVID, which was this time. And we know that gender-based violence was extremely risen during COVID. And when those needs are ignored, society becomes brittle, and brittle societies crack under pressure. So that is why also during my and Sweden's time as OSCE, we prioritized what we call the comprehensive security concept. It's it's wider than the human security conference, because it's both political and economical security, but also human rights, rule of law, democracy, anti-corruption. We can see for now, for example, how vulnerable Ukraine gets when there is this huge corruption scandal. That is weakening their possibility to get support to fight Russia. So anti-corruption is actually also part of strengthening the possibility to win a conflict or win a war when there is an aggressor. I would say that human security forces us to recognize that modern threats, that could be the Russia aggression, but it could also be climate disasters or disinformation or attacks on women's rights. It's not stopping at borders, because the target is then the cohesion of a society, and it undermines trust. The target, if the target is to undermine trust, the social fabric in a society will tear, and no amount of military capability can fully compensate if the trust in a society is broken. And this approach reframes security as something that we need to build together with people and not only for people. And we heard here about when Paul Nyrup said about we should cooperate with civil society and the public welfare sector. It's the same when it comes to security. So it means that we need to invest in clinics, in schools, education, and as part of defense budget. And we also need to listening to women peace builders, and minority communities, journalists, LGBT people, because they often detect changes in society before the formal diplomats do it. We need to understand that climate resilience, gender equality, democratic governance is not, as Christina said, soft topics. No, they are the foundation of the stability. I always, in all my travel as foreign minister, or EU minister for that matter, I had to get in the program meeting with women's group, journalists, and hopefully, when it was possible, minority likes LGBT people, because they listen, they know what was going on. And when you could feel that this is now, brittling, you had to be aware, because then you understand something is happening. So human security is not an alternative to hard security. It's what makes hard security effective, sustainable, and legitimate. I think I stand there for now.
Sorry. Thank you for these first remarks. Anne, I would like to ask you one more question, because in listening recently to government officials from Germany, I've remarked one major difference in the kind of reaction also to women's testimonies in several conflict areas. And I omitted one of your functions at the moment, which is also you are chairing you are the co-chair of the Feminist Foreign Policy Progressive Voices Collective, which is an initiative that FEPS and Friedrich Ebert Stiftung have been supporting, I think, in order also to rescue another concept, namely that of feminist foreign policy. And please forgive me to take the time to also ask you about this a little bit further. Do you see, is there a special need also to address this, and how can this strengthen the democratic backsliding? You've already touched upon it a little bit, but why is the special focus on women still important?
Of course I do. I mean, of course I think it's important. Sweden pursued a feminist foreign policy. We started already in 2014. We pursued it for 8 years. And then the first decision, my male successor as foreign minister took, the first decision was to abandon the feminist foreign policy. The feminist foreign policy is to recognize that half of the population are not part of anything that has to do with security policy or development policy. If they are not part of it, then something is wrong. And you could also see that if you don't have a gender analysis, you are not making the best possibility that you can. We always said that we should systematically work with gender analysis using the 3 R's: representation, rights, and resources. So everything we did was through these lens. And when it comes to military, many of you know about the Women, Peace and Security, and some of you even know about the UN Declaration 1325, which is about women, peace and security. And this is so important, because if you don't have a gender analyzing and look at what's happened to women in peace, you are weakened. I can take just one example. Every year the OSCE has a meeting with all the military advisors. And this year, when I was chair, I said we're going to have it in the NATO-certified center, Nordic Center, co-Nordic Center, for gender in military missions. And some of those military advisors said, this is just not hard security, this is just, bullshit, some said, we will not come. But in the end, we managed to get all of them to come. And it started with this very male Canadian, full dressed Iraqi veteran who said that because we didn't have a gender analysis, something went very wrong. And that was, for example, if there was no women when people were going into the camps, and those women were delivering important messages. We had a situation in one of the African countries where they didn't do a gender analysis, so the rebels, I don't say the name of the country, but this is 100% real experience. The rebels, they went to all those areas where the women got water. And that could be 1 kilometer from the village. When the women come to the water, they rape them. And not only did they rape them, they cut off one ear. So when they went back to the village, they were, outlaws. Because then the village said, you have been raped by our enemy, you are not welcome anymore. And many of you know what happened to the Yazidi women of IS at the same time. So if you don't do a gender analysis, which is part of the human security, part of the comprehensive security, you're actually weakening your own case to winning a military conflict or a war. So that's why also when it comes to security, military means, we need to have gender analysis, and we need to have, as I want to call it, feminist perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anne, for now. Thank you for really taking us in and even sharing this painful account. Now we would like to zoom out again a little bit with Johan. Henrik has already mentioned the multilateral system is quite under severe strain, and but we still know that many of today's problems, human security threats, they can also be pandemics, climate displacements, disinformation campaigns, they will only be solved collectively. We cannot solve them in the realm of nation states. They have to be solved on the level of societies with quite profound knowledge of these societies. What do you think is realistic? How can we find better ways of working together?
Thank you so much for inviting me. After the Second World War, we set up a set of institutions that have really served us well to secure our societies from freedom from want, freedom from fear, and so forth. This is coming under pressure. It's kind of a perfect storm at the moment. Geopolitical rivalry, but also very valid claims from emerging powers, the Global South, for more representation, a stronger voice on these bodies. The voting rights, just to say on IMF, on World Bank, just to have a more representative voice. So for that reason, these institutions are being locked. Another big factor is, of course, withdrawal of funds. And you see at the moment the US administration oscillating between the kind of the ideological, MAGA-inspired just withdrawal, simple withdrawal, and some transactional traits at times when they, okay, we can make a deal, we can give you a little bit of money to the UN because then we can get a gang suppression force in Haiti. But these are kind of the overall pressures that the UN and the whole multilateral system is faced with at the moment. But underlying that, there has been a longer trend already for some time because there has been more difficult to come to agreement. There's a large membership at the UN. Western states and other states have set up parallel mechanisms to solve global challenges, often very good ones. Take an example, Gavi in global health. It's a very good mechanism. It's public-private. Bill Gates is the main driver, you could say, initiator, and it works well. But when you see this happening again and again across fields, but then you also, you should be careful that these coalitions, these more informal mechanisms, are not outcompeting the multilateral and kind of legitimate institutions that we have. The overall picture, I guess, is that we see a trend from institutions to coalitions. That's disconcerting in some areas. Also in global security, this has been a very strong trend. We did a large research project on coalitions, so basically mapping them and seeing how they are. Now there are more and more states participating in them, and there are, it's really a main modus operandi in many different areas of global solving global challenges. So with that, what is happening? We kind of see that what we call deinstitutionalization. It's brittle, as you was talked earlier about societies. When their resources are being drained away, they are brittle and open for attack. So we have to find some kind of, this is thorny dilemmas. This is going to be difficult for us because would we still have the same ownership and want to have the organizations like the UN if the values don't fully reflect our own anymore? Because that's also a possible scenario going forward. So we have to find a balance between our investment into these institutions and continued investment, and find a balance between institutions and coalitions, between effectiveness and legitimacy. And this needs to be more flexible. So maybe in the area of hard security, a very recent positive step in the right direction is when you see also NATO and the EU sometimes gridlocked on particular issues. The Ukraine could now was just 2 weeks ago, became a member or had an enhanced partnership with the Joint Expeditionary Force. They're also cooperating much more closely with the Nordic-Baltic 8. So these kind of small steps to find solutions when the institutions are in gridlock, but at the same time trying to tie them into the institutions. That's going to be very important going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Speaking to you before the panel, you also taught me a little bit more about your recent research interests, and we have been speaking about human security in terms of protecting civilians during armed conflict, but there are also these kind of diffuse threats which have been mentioned, disinformation or attacks on civil infrastructure, or some might even say that migration is used as a weapon these days. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about what you think as a policy advice, how politics could address these better in order to also protect civilians from these fears, the fears that also feed into people voting for the far right because they get scared. You mentioned some interesting things about this.
Yeah. So we have built up societies that are massively dependent, have massive dependencies on private actors, on other countries, and so forth. And we're kind of thinly dispersed. So what a term that we use is weaponized interdependence. When these dependencies are turned against us, we have a problem. And that is happening increasingly. A recent example, I guess, is the chips production for cars that has stopped European car factories now just recently. But also these drones over airports here in Denmark, Belgium, elsewhere, shows us that we are not really ready to tackle these challenges. Because we have societies where critical infrastructure is basically controlled by a combination of military, private and public actors. And when before, during, and after crisis, these have to work together seamlessly. And we don't really have a culture for that. So we can't just develop a framework and hope it works. We have to start working together. And there are also some challenges involved in such cooperation because it leads inevitably to a form of securitization of our societies that we have to be very careful about how we manage. We can talk more about that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Henrik, would you like to comment on what our speakers have said, or I can also give you the floor after the first question, because we do indeed have time for questions, comments.
I'll wait.
Yeah. So, yeah, we have a question there. Our colleague will have you with the mic.
Thank you very much.
Please introduce yourself.
I think this is not working. Is it working?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. My name is Niels Hahn. I'm a researcher on US military intervention strategies. I've done research on this for the past 25 years. And I think there are some premises that we forget to discuss and analyze in these discussions on global security. And it's quite available from many American think tanks and declassified documents, and also from key people from the US security establishment, such as Henry Kissinger and Brzezinski. One of the key elements here is that we tend to forget or ignore is that a central plank of the US foreign policy has been for the past 30 years to keep a certain divisions in Eurasia. It's very clear when you look into the documents, but we don't look, we can't kind of ignore it or marginalizing it. But I think it's absolutely crucial that we start looking into this. It becomes now more clear with President Trump as in power, because he says things that actually they have written for the past 30 years. So it's not really that new, but to many people it seems to be quite new, and we are shocked about it now. But if we look at that, issues of what they would say keeping divisions between major Eurasian powers such as Russia, the EU and China, we get completely different perspectives and analysis of what's going on, from the disintegration of Yugoslavia to the war in Afghanistan and Ukraine, and many also of the conflicts in Africa. So I think we need to really have a much, much stronger focus on this if we are to secure our own security in the EU and also in the neighboring regions. So my question would be, what could we do to try to break that culture in research and journalism and policies, so we can get a more stronger and sharper realist analysis of contemporary affairs? Thank you.
I would like to collect some questions so that we can yes, please.
It's about security, and I'm thinking about cybersecurity and also digital handling, leak of data, privacy concerns. I think it ties together with the military situation. If you look back the last 20 years, there's been a lot of data leaks, and that's not been addressed at all. And the social media side, that's also part of the security picture. I think it's very vital, and it should be addressed by law and also by regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Please don't be shy. If you have more questions or comments, otherwise we can also start the first round.
About cybersecurity, I think the first question is very difficult because it takes a lot of reflection on how to change the way we talk about it and the way we look at it. So I'm not sure I'm able to give the answer, but I will think about what you said. The cyber threats, I think we also have to accept that in Europe there are two kind of insecurities right now. We have, when we talk about the Baltic countries, the Nordic countries, and the northern part of Europe, of course, the war in Ukraine is so very close, and I think we are very offensive in dragging EU into supporting Ukraine, because as our Prime Minister always says, that if we lose that war, Ukraine is not the first, is not the last, but it's the first in a path of other countries that will have this. But I think that when we talk about the southern part of Europe, for instance, I think Trump was out saying that Spain should be thrown out of NATO because they don't want to have the 5% of its GDP to investing in military. I think that the southern part of Europe is facing another threats, and that's about the geopolitical situation. I think it's in 2050, 25% of the world population will come from Africa. And if we don't somehow do something about the climate change, if we don't do it more able to make investments, to make growth, to make wealth in the African countries, I think that the pressure we have seen in immigration is going to be massive in the future about that. And it's the southern part of Europe that experience the immigration part. And I think that we in Europe has to take both the agendas and somehow say it's a common problem and we have to solve it together.
Yeah, please, Anna.
A few comments on the first question. One is yes and no. I mean, you could see lines of the American policies a long line, but at the same time, it's very, very different on who is the president. I was Minister of Trade the whole first, and the EU affairs, the whole first period of Trump. And you could really see how they did not believe in multilateral cooperation. And for example, it was we have something called the Arctic Council. That's the 8 Arctic countries. And for the first time in the history of the Arctic Council, United States decided that they could not accept anything about climate or environment, and to have a final document of Arctic area without mentioning climate or environment is just ridiculous. And so then they said, we put veto in if we have it. So and then the rest of us said, okay, then we cannot have a final document, because then we will weaken our position. And that happened also when it came to United Nations meetings. It went so far that France and Germany started a kind of a pushback cooperation for us who believe in multilateralism, because the United States were so effectively gathering countries who did not want to work in a multilateral arena. So then we have a pushback. Actually, we were more countries than them. And one of the first things that Trump then did was to gang up with Saudi Arabia, the Vatican, and others to have a coalition for the right of life, which was actually anti-abortion. So then there was, at least you have, when they're starting to attack the sexual and reproductive health and rights for women, then you should really be aware, because that is a sign of something much bigger. The other thing is that, yes, think tanks are doing a lot of work, but what I see is that it's like silos. The think tanks needs to find ways to get their information to the policymakers in a much more effective way. Because now, when you're out of office, you realize how enormously rich the think tank world is, and how much knowledge and everything, but it doesn't come to the ministers who are making the decision, because you don't have the time. I mean, you travel every week, you could have 10 meetings in one day, and then there are people who have been sitting for 30 years analyzing United States, but it doesn't help me when I'm going to make decisions with Pompeo or Blinken or whatever. We need to find a way to shorten the distance between think tank analysis and those who make the real decision. That could be parliamentarians or governments. And that's why, for example, we have an interesting discussion in Sweden now, because we have not have civil foreign intelligence service in Sweden, like an MI6. We only have a military intelligence, and they are also the one who should analyze the civil threats. And now the former foreign minister and prime minister Carl Bildt, which some of you might have heard of, he had proposed that Sweden should also have a civil foreign intelligence service. And I'm not surprised that the whole defense establishment is 100 or 200% against it. But I think that would be a good thing, especially because then you can also gather in a much more effective way what all think tanks are doing. You mentioned some American think tanks, but there are also others. Because now there is a gap that needs to be closed.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what you said also underlines how important the Nordic democratic model in terms of its consultation processes of civil society and think tanks are. And forgive me, but I feel also that this is also under threat from some conservative far right-wing alliances who are not consulting so much as you probably tried to do during your ministerial times. But I do take note. I know that the shorter the briefing paper, the better, but it's also really hard to write these very short briefing papers when you have a lot to tell. And I think the other point you made is also interesting because you talked about the Arctic, where the natural scientists say climate change happens 3 to 4 times faster than in the rest of the world, and it's sort of a laboratory for us. And we have seen also in the fora that involves civil society and universities at the Arctic level, the Arctic Circle meetings, that security came in there very strongly, and even there was some effects of only talking about great power rivalries in the Arctic, and it was very interesting to see, I think, this concept that you mentioned earlier, when security becomes the only thing you think about, how your priorities change. We have done a small study in FES on that, how states' priorities in the Arctic have changed after the Ukraine war. And we came to this conclusion that, okay, we mustn't forget also what our priorities are.
And I missed, of course, to say that the attitude changed 100% when Biden came. Then they were back to multilateralism, back to wanting to make deals, back to work together in multilateral organizations to have common final document, common decision, and so on. And then now it turned back again when Trump came. So yes, there are some overall American interests, but it's a big change if it's an Obama or a Trump or a Biden or anybody else who do the work.
So it does show that there are big differences between social democrats in power and others. But maybe there's also something to take up before you comment on the already posed questions about the role of civil society in the multilateral sphere. Do you see that changing within these, I mean, more ad hoc alliances amongst bilateral countries also leaves less space for civil society to come in, or am I wrong?
Civil society has been vibrant and has had a very strong role in developing new norms for global governance. Take the Mind Bank Convention, for example. It was really civil society that was one of the driving forces to put it in place. Now that is unraveling because of large-scale war of aggression in Ukraine. And states are now moving back their positions. But civil society certainly has had a very big role. Now funding, is being scaled down by a lot of states, not only the US. A lot of Western states have scaled back their development funding, and with that also funding to civil society is under pressure. At least when it comes to the human security dimension in conflicts, enduring conflict. Countries, yeah. So it's a difficult position at the moment, I think. For Western states, we should really consider, small states in Europe. We are not the US, and we need to, in our own self-interest, have to find new ways of making alliances that can help us in the future. And maybe not only with the larger powers, but with new partners in different parts of the world, so South Africa or Brazil or Mexico, and this is, I'm sure, is something that you worked a lot on when you were a minister, because we have to have create a safety net for ourselves to kind of take care of those rules that are there and that have served us well over the time, because the alternative is bleak. I came back from Kyiv yesterday. I've been there for a week, and with this too little too late, we put out a report this week on scenarios for Ukraine where too little too late will not serve us very well. It doesn't take very long before we will have a new wave of refugees. The same thing, scaling down development aid to countries in Northern Africa is probably not a good thing. they have some of them, some of the French-speaking countries turned to Russia for help not so long ago. That has not helped them, and I assume they will come back to the Western partners and ask for help soon. Then we should be able to, step up and do that. That will help us in the long run, both in terms of human security and for the safety of our own countries here in Europe.
Would you like to, you're looking to me, would you like to comment on this again? Or otherwise we have even time for more questions. Yes? Oh.
First of all, thank you for organizing this, very important meeting, because Europe is shaking. And Europe have to find and identify a new role to give a response to Mr. Trump trying to undermine what generations have built up of institutions, of cooperations, and so on. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Helle Dein, here from Denmark. I'm former president of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Very special for a woman, but Denmark was paying a lot of the money for the OSCE. So we hosted also the Parliamentary Assembly headquarters here in Copenhagen. So I was elected of my colleagues, members of parliament from 53 countries. And also I've served as Minister for Development Cooperation in Denmark, and also many other, forget about it, it's long, I'm old. So I'll just say, you have been given a possibility to talk about the geopolitical context. And I think that is the most important for Europeans to get to understand. It is for Europe to take up the glove and fight back. We have a new situation where in Denmark, in little Denmark, we have the visit of a very big Indian delegation to talk about risks, how to cope with all kinds of conflicts. They are reaching out their hand from big India to Europe, to some of the European countries. Come on, guys, what is the new situation? We have to reach out our European hands to China. Not to continue to hate communism, but to cooperate with the generations in power now in China, in India, and of course, United States, yes, but they are not that big because China have already bought them. They have the upper hand on the American economy. This is not the media picture, but this is the reality. They can clash down the United States if and when they want to. So that's the reason why I think nowadays responsible politicians, I'm a senior, I'm a retired, it's not my problem, it's your problem. You are in charge. So please come up with suggestions, because we all know that UN is not functioning in the security matters because of an old-time construction. And one of our former ministers of foreign affairs, Mr. Per Hækkerup, told me, institutions and that old, you cannot change, but just let them live. And then create something new. Hello. This is your job. You are in charge. This generation is in charge. So come up with open hands, reach out to make new lines to China, new lines to other countries, big countries, important countries, Japan and India, and what we have. Thank you very much. This was just
a motivational speech.
I mean, since you already asked the question,
I think there were some more questions who were first time asking questions, right?
There is a woman there who has asked for the floor for a long time.
I put you on the list, but I would like
Thank
to...
you very much. My name is Sara Bojarczuk. I'm an assistant professor in Center of Migration Research at Warsaw University, but also a member of FEPS. As I listened to it, I kind of got it prompted me the reflection that when we talk about human security nowadays in Europe, there is no human in there. It's security. And when we look at relationship with Africa, as you've mentioned, by 2050, 25% of European population will be of African origin or come from Africa. My question would be, I really hope so, because Africa has also other partners to deal with, to start with. And it's not only Europe that is now competing for the interest, it's also China, it's also India. And if we want to see our retirement money, pensions, and care, I guess that's what we should really hope for. But also, in order to see that, we should make this migration humane. Because what we see, and what we've been talking in the previous panel, is the fact that those people who come, they don't come because they want, because they look for opportunities, but they don't leave their countries because their situation is so extravagant, and they live a luxurious lifestyle. It's because most of them is economic migration, which means that they come here to improve their well-being. And so if they have to tackle bad working conditions, lack of contracts and security, precarity, we've talked about it, what kind of human security is that? And as we talk about human security and mostly security, I'm going to say something that is very unwelcome usually in a European talk, is Polish and Belarusian border, where people die in the forest, still, year after year after year, where migration is a tool. And so all the action from NGOs is ignored by the government. People still have to find a way to secure their livelihood. So I guess perhaps the remark is that when we talk about advancing human security, we should really think about human in it. So thank you.
I saw at least two more people. Yes, 1, 2.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Gerke. One of the things I do here in Copenhagen is I work with Ukrainian refugees learning English. Don't make the accent freak you out too much. Yes, I'm half American, but I'm also Swedish. I just wanted to emphasize, I completely agree with Ann Linda on the question of corruption being an internal threat in Ukraine and a security threat, but I also think it's very important to emphasize that we shouldn't focus on it too much in pushing Ukraine away, because we also have corruption problems inside Europe, and as Swedes we know very well, like situations with the school system and things like that, that also could arguably be seen as corruption if it was in a Ukrainian context. So just to emphasize that, yes, we have to deal with corruption, but don't let it create a rift between us and Ukraine, because we all have the same issues. Thank you.
Thank you. There was one more. And I think then we almost have to close the speakers, the questions. Okay, we take 2 more questions and then I close, because we want to give our speakers also the time to answer.
Yes, my name is Furkan. I'm a journalist student here at Roskilde University. I'm also a member of the European Youth, which is an organization that is about like informing young people of why European cooperation is important. And I'm also a member of the youth branch of the biggest opposition party in Turkey, the Republican People Party, the CHP. And when we talk about security in Europe, we don't we can't really get around the big elephant in the room, which is the Turkish President Erdogan, which is who's not a nice guy in my opinion, and also hopefully also to a lot of you guys who are sitting here. And my question is, how do we he's an important man because he has a big army, and when we talk about a peace deal in Ukraine, he's the only capable and like also along with other EU members, he's capable to provide peacekeeping troops, but how do we tackle this dilemma that we have this political crisis in Turkey where a lot of opposition politicians are jailed, and journalists are being jailed, and a lot of people who are politically active, also young people my age, are being jailed. How can we like both keep a good cooperation with Turkey, but also like put a pressure on President Erdogan and make sure that we can like walk into a future which is a more democratic in Turkey? Thank you.
Thank you. I ask you to be brief with the questions because I thought we had a lot of time, but time is running also. So if we leave it at that, then we would give it back to our panelists. I think it's very interesting because a lot of questions touched on this question whether our changing multilateral order, new ad hoc coalitions give us a new perspective on the countries of the global south and our global alliances, and whether that has to change the way that we speak with other countries in the world. And there was some remarks about whether our migration policies have to change in relation to that. And some more questions. Not enough time to sum it all up, but maybe you would like to take a shot at the ones you want to answer.
Well, first of all, I think that the last I've heard is that there are more societies, countries that are autocratic than democratic. And I think that's a very big challenge for all of us. I think I will take the one, I think I said it was 25% of the world's population in Africa, not 25% in Europe. But as a Dane, I know in the social democratic European community that it's not all who is comme il faut in the way we have had our discussions about immigrants and refugees. And I think it's because we are talking about being tough and fair, and that we have realized that actually it means a lot how many people that we accept to make the society function. And it's of course it can sound very inhumane, but I think if we look at Europe, if we look at some of the countries, what are we seeing? We are seeing that the right wing, or even the extreme right wing, is benefiting from not being able to take the discussions about how do we do it. I think it's still about security for those who are here and how we support with it. But I don't think that Europe can solve the problem in Europe alone. We have to look outside the borders and have some effects on how the living condition is. I think that's very important. One last thing about feminism is that one of the things that we have realized in Denmark, if you're talking about stroke, you've always heard that I think it's the right or the left arm that it will begin. That's research only for men. It's different for women, but nobody have researched in it because all the research is men that are also researching in women diseases and so on. It's just to say, I think that it's an angle that is very important in all matters. So I think it means something, yes.
Well, thank you to touch upon some of the questions. But first I will just take up what you said about democracy. Today, 73% of the world's population live in autocratic states. 10 years ago, it was 49. So 10 years ago, less than half of the world's population live in autocratic states. Now it's more than 73%. And the last 10 years, the number of military conflict have doubled. So it's more anti-democratic and more dangerous. So that is also, where we have to be. When it comes to reaching out to India and so on, I totally agree. You can see, for example, when it comes to G20 and the chair until Monday is South Africa, and before that it was Brazil. And what they did also was to have a close cooperation with the civil society in what's called the T20. I was representing FEPS in South Africa for the T20 in June. The next chair taking over on Monday is United States. They have decided to skip T20. They don't want it. And that led also that several think tanks, FEPS, Brazilian think tank, Indian think tank, kind of said we need to survive the American G20 presidency, because if they destroy what has been built up mainly actually by Global South, they have been very, very effective in this. Indonesia first, and then Brazil and South Africa. We should not allow the American administration to destroy this, because it's too valuable. But then you have to find ways of surviving. When it comes to, and also we have actually some alternative. You mentioned Joint Expeditionary Force. That was, or is, a very effective cooperation, military cooperation between the Nordic countries, Baltic countries, UK. So it's both EU, non-EU, and is having, that has been more important for us, not more important than NATO, but it's more training exercises, everything. So it's very effective, and it's new because we needed that. Then you mentioned the CHP in Turkey, and it's absolutely 100% not acceptable what's happening with the mayors or Imamoglu or many put into jail. Selahattin Demirtas is still in jail after 10 years, should be out already 10 years ago. But we need to have at the same time a relation with Turkey, because they are too big not to have it. So the key is not to cut the relation, but to always protest against the declining when it comes to human rights, democracy, media rights, and so on and so forth. And ask me, I mean, we sat for 5 hours final negotiation with Erdogan and Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu before we could even get an invitee status to NATO, and then they withhold it for 2 more years. So I know a little bit about the strong Turkish men. When it comes to immigration, I understand that there is a human dimension and so on, but just as Henrik said, we need to have a strict immigration, because we have failed in making an integration. I was State Secretary for Home Affairs 2015. We got 163,000 asylum seekers coming to Sweden in half a year. And on top of that, you have the terror attack, and Ebola, and Greece financial crisis, and everything. And I have to say we failed. I mean, now 20% of Swedes are immigrants, 20%. And we have not managed to integrate all of them in a good way in the Swedish society. But we don't agree from our party that they should totally give up their culture or assimilate. No, they should not. But they need to, if they live in Sweden, they need to follow, the values and so on that we have. But we don't say you have to change your religion, or like Sweden Democrats said, Islam is by definition terrorism. We don't say that. But we have failed with the balance. So we have changed in Sweden. At the same time, I think it's interesting that the country in Europe that has the best economy now is Spain. And just 2 days ago or something like that, the Spanish government went out and said one of our keys to success is that we have immigration, and they have managed it in a way. For example, they give, every year, they allow Moroccan immigrants to come to the farming sector, and they get proper permits to stay for, if it's 3 or 4 months, they get housing, they get paid, and then they go back to Morocco. So, I mean, it's a win-win for Spain and Morocco, or the people, the farmers in Spain who needs the workforce, and the Moroccan workers who can make money. So it is possible to think out of the box and do things. And then finally, I just have to comment a little bit on Ukraine and corruption. You cannot compare corruption in Sweden, for example, with corruption in Ukraine. I mean, if you do those comparisons, then it's not possible to tackle the whole problem, to say it's because the corruption problem in Ukraine is enormous. There is no enormous corruption problem in Sweden. Yes, we have, you said schools. We have private schools. That's not corruption. But we don't like that you can have a private profit out of tax money. We are the only country in the world who allow that. Unfortunately, there is a political majority for that. We are in a minority. But it's not corruption. And you have a few cases of corruption that are being dealt with, but it's not on the scale. So I think you're not doing Ukraine a good thing if you try to diminish it. Instead, you say, could we help? Could we help with, anti-corruption rules and regulation or whatever? So that is, that would be my last word for this time.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll just add a little bit to the last topic, because I came back from Kiev this week where I did interviews on the willingness to defend. And I met, amongst others, quite a few representatives of the anti-corruption civil society. And of course, a very poignant question now is does this corruption scandals, do they really affect how Ukrainians think about the continuing to fight back against the Russians? And they are really, they want to point out, everyone I met, that this is good that this happened, because this shows that the system works, and it was possible to make change in the summer when they tried to change how these two, Nabu and Sap, were ruled. And so there was very strong support from the civil society people that I met. They also acknowledged that a lot of work remains. There is still, a country in war with large sums of money coming through. It's fairly reasonable to believe that there will be corruption scandals, and will continue to be so. There will be opportunities that some people will grab. But I think Ukraine has moved, I think, 30, 40 places on the corruption ranking. So it has really improved, amongst other things, because they have more digital services. So it's simply harder to get a small fee for coming, passing the line, or getting not serving on the front line, which is a big issue. People are, paying to get a disability stamp or things like that, so they don't have to serve. But there is progress, and I think it shouldn't discourage us for continuing to support Ukraine.
Thank you very much. It's great when you have these expert speakers. They are so to the point. You almost hit the mark that you needed for your panel. Thank you all for reminding us that citizens must remain at the center of our efforts to improve security of the European Union and strengthen our defense capabilities. And after all, I think the EU's mission was to protect its people from the first place onwards. But I also liked that during the panel we managed to extend this and to broaden our view. And I really appreciate also that, Henrik, you mentioned especially the development aid and also looking at addressing problems together in the countries that we have created together, like climate change and so on and so forth. That is an important reminder, and I think, there are very, very many good points that you gave us to take away. We don't want to stand between you and the lunch. I thank our wonderful experts and for this really inspiring panel.
I'm going to see them separate. Okay. Yeah.